Hey everybody, this is Dr. Maples. We're here with our final lecture in the socialization lecture series. How about that? So we're going to wrap up a couple more ideas about how we as individuals are expected to behave. This will be a slightly longer lecture than the last one, so be patient with me, but there's some really valuable, important ideas in here. Now, what I want to talk about today are roles. Roles are things that we do for other people. We serve purposes in this society. Remember, society is constructed of individuals. Without the individuals, there's no society. But we all have different experiences. We're all expected to do different kinds of roles in this society for it to function. Now, when we think about this, we can start to see some of the things that we're expected to do for others. For example, I'm expected to be a professor. I'm expected to be a scholar. I'm expected to be an expert on economic impact studies. I'm expected to be a father. I'm expected to be a partner. I'm expected to be a son. I'm expected to be a sibling. And then we can get into the public roles. I'm expected to do all sorts of things in terms of interacting with other people and being nice and playing well and following laws. I'm expected to do a lot of things. Some of these things particularly are kinds of roles, though, where I'm serving a particular thing for other people. Other ones are actually just expectations that have sometimes been put upon me based upon what I've achieved or what people think about me. Sometimes there are even things here we'll talk about that overwhelm everything else that I could do and just sort of represent me as an idea, whether I want it or not. I want to talk about these today because they're important. We're going to go through two different kinds of roles. First off, we're going to talk about status roles, which are statuses placed upon us by other people or by ourselves. And then we're going to talk about social roles, where we fulfill certain roles to others, but these can create a lot of strain and stress in our own individual lives. In fact, to the point that we sometimes have to exit these roles. So let's start with status roles. Now, status roles are a really interesting idea because they think about how other people see us in terms of our placement in society. And they go through different versions. There's one that is something that we earn that status, another one where we're given that status whether we asked for it or not, and a third one that can be either the first one or the second one that overrides what everyone else would expect from us, regardless of anything we might do or say. Let's walk through these slowly, and I'll try to use personal examples here so that you can understand it, and I'll also try to bring in lots of other examples as well. So let's first think about achieved status. Now, achieved status is first off what you're doing right now. You're coming to EKU, you are completing this class, and you're going to get your degree. You're going to walk across the stage, give the president a handshake and a high five, and then you're going to get a little piece of paper that says you have magically graduated from EKU. You get to put BA, BS, any combination of B bachelor degree letters behind your name from now on. And also some of you may choose to stay here or go to other universities and get graduate degrees. You can put even more letters. These are all what we call achieved statuses. I, for one, have an achieved status in my PhD. PhDs are considered the highest doctorate in the land. There's no academic degree above them, which I think is kind of cool. I was just happy that I got my Eagle Scout, but now I get to be a doctor. And we're generally respected. People hear that you're a doctor, and they treat you differently. It's interesting. I did an interview yesterday, actually, and it was funny because during the recording process, they don't call me James. They just kept calling me Dr. Maples. And at some point, I had to be like, it's okay in this situation for you to just call me James. Like, okay, Dr. James, which I thought was kind of fun. You have to call me Dr. Maples, by the way. I just want to be very clear about that. Or Professor Maples. Go back to that lecture we talked about early in the semester about what you should call your professors. It's still on Blackboard. So anyways, with achieved statuses, these are something that we earn. We earn these labels. Now, we could think of situations where maybe you decide you just want to be the best thief out there, and so you try to earn the title of best thief. One of my students in the past has pointed out to some of the gangsters of the era who wanted to be the greatest and best in their field of being, someone who shoots people and robs banks. That could technically be an achieved status, but to keep things a little more easy to understand and comfortable, I always think of achieved statuses in terms of degrees, positions, honorifics, titles that you might earn. These also include promotions at jobs. So maybe you're now a regional assistant manager, or you're the assistant to the manager, not just the assistant manager. Nonetheless, that was an office joke. Anyways, it's achieved status is a really cool thing because it shapes how other people see us. When I introduce myself to other people as Dr. Maples, it has a certain, okay. When I check into hotels, when I put my registration, I always put that, I'm Dr. James Maples. And it's funny because often people are like, oh, hello, doctor, how are you today? And people assume that you're a medical doctor, and, you just roll with that. You just kind of get used to it at some point. But that's an achieved status. People treat you differently based on a status that you've earned. But then there's ascribed statuses. Ascribed statuses feel a little more icky. Ascribed statuses are things that we are given that we didn't choose. So, for example, the moment that you're born, you're given a whole bunch of ascribed statuses. You're given your parents' socioeconomic status, which is how much money they make based on their household incomes and what kind of power that gets them. We'll talk about that later in the stratification lectures, next lecture series, in fact. We get race is assigned to us. We get our sex assigned to us, which the sex one is especially interesting because actually 17 of every 1,000 babies approximately are born with indeterminate characteristics of both male and female. But something has to be put on there, and a decision is made that male or female will be put. In fact, apparently there's no other option, as I understand it from talking with a gender scholar recently. That's exciting. We're given all sorts of things. You're even given a name that you're going to have follow you for years. Within a couple of months, you're given a social security number, this number that's used to track you. These are all sorts of ascribed statuses that are given to you. Now, if these were just things that were given to us and they didn't have meaning, it would be okay. But one of the things that we find is these statuses that we didn't ask for but we got anyways are things that are used to treat us differently. So, for example, one of the things that I've seen in teaching is that students are often treated differently by teachers based on their sex, based on their race, and even based on their socioeconomic status. That's a problem. That's why ascribed statuses feel icky, because we're treating people differently based on these things. Now, if that wasn't the case, ascribed statuses really wouldn't be any more different than being told that, oh, you like metal detecting, which I do, by the way. It's not a big deal. You're a metal detectorist. Okay, that's fine. But something like race can really be a problem. We'll talk a little bit more about this too in the stratification lecture series coming up in our next exam series, so I don't want to talk too much here about it. But we can see how ascribed status can actually be used to discriminate against us. It's something to consider. It's very different than an achieved status, something that you earned. An ascribed status is something that you're given that you didn't necessarily ask for. There are times, too, that master statuses will come in. A master status is something achieved or ascribed that overrides everything else. The felony conviction is a really good example of this. I know people in academic circles who work for universities who would love to get doctorates and become professors, but because they have felonies on their record, they effectively can't. It doesn't matter how great some of them would truly be, and some that I know would be amazing professors, but nonetheless, they're barred from entry because most state universities and most colleges won't hire people with felony records to be professors. It's just a thing. It's something that is a master status. Whether we treat that as an achieved status or an ascribed status, it doesn't really matter here because it controls everything else that they might do. Even if they did get their PhD and an achieved status, they still wouldn't be allowed to teach because they have this felony, which is a master status. So it overrides everything else. Race is often used in this same way. People decide that no matter what you say or do, because of your race, they're going to treat you differently. Sex is another one, where based on your sex or even the perceptions of your sex, they are going to treat you differently no matter what you do. Socioeconomic status is a less common one, but one that nonetheless still happens. Again, they're treating you differently regardless of what you do. That's a problem. That's why these status roles, too, are very interesting. Think about your own experiences. Where would you describe the roles that you fulfill in this society in terms of achieved statuses, ascribed statuses, or master statuses? This gives you a good chance to reflect on those. Likewise, because of your achieved, ascribed, and master statuses, how are others treating you? Status roles are a really interesting way to analyze our own self and our construction of who we are, and moreover, try to make sense of why people treat us the way that they do, illogical as it almost often is. I want to flip over, though, to also add another component to this. Status roles completed, we also fulfill social roles. Now, where status roles are things that are earned or given to us or override how people will treat us, social roles are expectations that we perform for people who occupy a particular place in our society or the groups that we're in. It's a role that we're expected to fulfill. I often am, for example, asked to be an expert. That's one of the things I'm expected, that I've read a lot of stuff, I've done research, and I know all these things about economic development, and so I'm an expert. I was recently by the university given a study to look at, and they said, tell us what this study says. And so I was expected to go through and more or less summarize a 80-something page, almost book kind of document in a couple of hours and tell them, well, this is what it says, and these are my thoughts on how they conducted the study. That's my expectation. That's one of my roles. What do we expect of people? Think about what we expect from people in our society. So when you go into a fast food restaurant, what do you expect from the person behind the counter? What roles do you expect them to fulfill? Moreover, be a different person for a moment. What might someone else expect of them? Maybe a different generation. For me, I'm just happy if they get my order right. That's my singular expectation. And frankly, even if that expectation isn't met, it's okay, because it's just a cheeseburger. We'll get it right, I promise. And if we don't get it right this time, there will be future cheeseburgers. What do we expect of your professors? What do our professors expect of our students? What do people expect of their parishioners, of their ministers, of their police? These are all exciting social roles because we're fulfilling certain things in our society that helps this whole system run. But these social roles can be a lot for us. In fact, I want to talk about 3 ways in which we handle roles as individuals, because these two can tell us a lot about A, who we are, and B, who as individuals, having thought about how so much of our individuality is socialized, we might want to change who we are. Now, the first one is role strain. It's many demands, one role. The mom in our society is a great example of that. What do we expect of mom? We expect magically mom to make everything better, to take care of us, often to feed us, to take care of us when we're ill, to be there when things are going wrong. We have strong expectations of that. But think about being a mom for a moment. Think about how all these demands are being placed upon you, all these different roles. Not to mention traveling to soccer games, and hey, maybe mom is also a full-time employee. So on top of that, there's lots of things going on. Nonetheless, with role strain, we have one role, mom, with many, many demands. Take me here, take me there, give me money, I'm sick, take care of me, feed me, everything's going wrong, make it better. These are all these demands that we're placing on it. It's a strain because it puts a lot of pressure on the individual. Now, there's also instances where we have what we call role conflicts. There's a mild version of that. That's actually a really good version of that. I take that back. Of a mom who is also a full-time employee. You're two things. You're a worker and you're a mom. You're expected to do 2 roles, but these roles conflict. Likewise, being a student athlete is a classic example of role conflict. You have 2 or more roles. You are a student, you are an athlete, and you're expected to do both of these fully. But there's only so many hours in the day, and yet you're somehow magically expected to do all of those things. It's a lot of conflict. Even for me, being a professor and being a dad, being a professor and being a partner in my family, these are things that they conflict sometimes. There are times where I would much rather be with my family and with my daughter, but at the same time, my job expects that I have to be doing other things like being an expert and being an interviewee and all sorts of other stuff. So these conflicts put a lot of pressure on you as an individual. Our final one is considering how we leave roles. And for those of you who've seen the Breaking Bad series, I feel like that entire series is really just the story of Walter White going through role exit. It's him learning how he steps out of the role of being a teacher and move on to something else that will take care of his family, because teaching doesn't always pay well, especially in the TV series that we're talking about. When we experience role exit, it's because either the role strain or the role conflict or other factors have simply made the role that we're expected to play untenable. It's impossible. We can't complete this role anymore. I have a friend from graduate school who was a police officer for over a decade and simply woke up one day and said, I can't do this anymore. Likewise, I've worked with other people who have said the same thing. They've done a profession for decades, and they wake up one day and they just say, I can't do this anymore. Even professors are an example of this, where we just burn out and have to start new careers. Role exit is where we learn to step out of a role. But as we step out of a role, we're now in an amazing place where we have to decide as an individual now who we are, because we cast off those roles. This is something that I've always thought about, even on my own level as being a professor. Will a day come that I decide I no longer want to be a professor? What will that experience be like, not having students anymore? And what will the future look like for me? This is something to think about, because you too may have roles that you're thinking about. So that's where we are for this lecture. We've learned so many different kinds of socialization. We've learned about some theorists that help us think about who we are as an individual. They help us think, too, quite a bit about how socialization plays an unpredictable and strange and, frankly, even sometimes frightening and disheartening role in how we understand ourselves and experience our lives. That wraps up our socialization lecture. Now make sure and go through and complete all the quizzes, because there's quite a few of them. Make sure and take care of that critical thinking assignment. Double check that you've completed everything. If you have questions, concerns, you aren't sure that you completed something, write me. I'm here to help. That's my job. That's my role, in fact, is to answer your questions. And I'll promise to make sure it doesn't conflict with any other roles. If you have questions, send them to me. I'm here to help. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you in our next lecture series, where we're going to start talking about something called stratification and inequality. It's our third exam series. I'll see you there. Take care. Bye.